Hello, Apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to my retrospective for WWF Royal Rumble 1998. I'll be here covering this event for the WWF, and this is the first in-depth look at the Attitude Era events. I'm going to have a little read round, a little recap of the storylines going into the Royal Rumble and the actual event itself. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Be the World Wrestling Federation champion. There is no parallel, no higher accolade in the sport. To be WWF champion is the dream of every competitor who's ever entered the squared circle. From collegiate champions to former gridiron greats, from second-generation superstars with championship pedigree to first-year rookies with youthful aspirations, from Olympic heroes to the master of the octagon. From a renegade with a cold-blooded identity to a man who would willingly exchange 3 personas for one with a champion's label. Tonight, 30 men who dare to dream. 30 battle-scarred warriors who have spilled blood, sweat, and endured the agonies. Who have labored in the cold shadows for that one precious chance to seize the championship spotlight are on a collision course with destiny. Tonight, 30 men will batter each other, sacrifice their bodies, betray friendships, embrace the soulless ally that is desperation. To the victor go the spoils. To the winner, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to become the next heir apparent to the WWF throne. And now, 1-800-COLLECT presents the 1998 WWF Royal Rumble.
This is where it all begins for the WWF Attitude Era, at least for this run of content I'm doing. And as I mentioned previously, I've used the marker of Monday Night Raw, December the 15th. And just to recap, that's purely for 2 reasons. Number one, on this particular show, Vince McMahon cuts a promo, I guess you can call it, stating that the WWF is going in a new direction, and it's a bit of a signal of things to come, and also a reinforcement of some of the more risque stuff they have been doing up until this point. And this is also the first time that the WWF Attitude scratch logo is used in the bottom left-hand screen or corner of the broadcast for Raw. I've seen it in some of the small Attitude promos they've done up until this point, but it's still, been the old sort of blue and yellow logo at that point. It may have appeared on a Saturday Night Shotgun before this, but this is the first time I noticed it on Raw, and I'm only focusing on Raw for now. So it's a very interesting point, sort of mid-December, because at this point it's after the Montreal screw job. That's all happened. So Bret's fucked off and he's gone over to WCW. I think he's made his debut at this point because he didn't actually start appearing for them until December. So he's over there and he's kicking off his program with WCW. The Hart Foundation is basically dissolved because Jim Neidhart has left at this point, or is very close to leaving. British Bulldog is still trying to work out an arrangement, and we're talking about mid-December here purely, to leave and join WCW. The problem he's having at this point is that he's actually got a fairly long term left on his contract, so it's causing a bit of an issue. The WWF don't just want to let him go, and I think in the end Bulldog is convinced to buy himself out of the contract for about 150 grand. That's in dollars, so it's a bit of a stinker for Bulldog if he had to pay that all out of his own pocket. But Neidhart and Bulldog wanted away, and they let Neidhart go for for reasons that we won't go into. I guess they didn't see him as much of an asset. But Owen is stays at WWF, and he's there on his own to fend for himself. And what's interesting is that the last pay-per-view, which is called D-Generation X, which takes place in December, before the 15th of December, so it's happened just before that. Ken Shamrock had been getting a little bit of a push, which I think I mentioned on my on the Golden Era and New Generation kind of catch-up. he was getting a little bit of a push, and he ends up facing Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship at D-Generation X in your house. He won by DQ. Helmsley interfered once Shamrock had slapped on the ankle lock on Shawn. Shawn retains his title because the titles don't change hands for DQs. Owen Hart, then, who hadn't been on TV much, if at all, perhaps, since the Montreal Screwjob, appears after the match. He knocks Michaels off the apron, who goes through the announcer's table, jumps on top of him, and lands some pretty stiff-looking punches. I'm not sure if he laid a couple in for his brother Brett, but they're pretty stiff punches he's landing on Michaels' head, and then he gets chased off by Helmsley and Chyna. Elsewhere on that card, Jeff Jarrett defeated The Undertaker by disqualification, in which was a pretty subpar match, really, by all accounts. Steve Austin defended his title, his Intercontinental title, against The Rock after beating all of the Nation of Dominations. It was a short match again, so I don't think Steve was quite fully fit. Triple H beat Sergeant Slaughter in a boot camp match. The New Age Outlaws defeated LOD by disqualification and kept their tag team championships. Butterbean, yes, the boxer, defeated Mark Mero in a tough man match, which was like a 3-round, worked boxing match, which is an odd thing to do. Didn't go over well at all. Takamichi Inoku defeated Brian Christopher and become the first ever WWF light heavyweight champion, and the Disciples of Apocalypse were beaten by Savio Vega's Los Boricas in a 6-man tag match. They're still going on with that kind of gang wars angle with Los Boricas and DOA and the Nation. They're sort of 3 factions that are warring against each other. So that's all happened at D-Generation X, which is the pay-per-view before this particular Raw. It's a couple of Raws after this, but that's what's sort of the main stuff that's happened before we pick up on the 15th of December. So the way I'm going to do this is actually run through the Royal Rumble. So what we're doing with these is to get to the pay-per-view, the next pay-per-view, run through that, but then recap the match storylines going into it using the Raws, before that. So I'll be going through Royal Rumble matches and then referring to what had happened in the lead up to lead to the match, and then talking a little bit about the match as well. I'm using Pro Wrestling Torch. They've got an archive of all the newsletters and stuff they did back then. They're really interesting to read, actually. All sorts of information there, but I'm using those just to reference now and again, and also there's a couple of quotes and analysis I wanted to pull out on this particular episode because they made me chuckle. But we get to the Royal Rumble, 1998 Royal Rumble this is, and for those that don't know, the Royal Rumble is a yearly event. It's a pay-per-view that the WWF puts on, and the main spectacle is the Royal Rumble match, which is 30 wrestlers that enter the ring, usually between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. They seem to change it back and forth, and a new wrestler enters every couple of minutes or so. You start with 2 people and it builds up. The way to be eliminated is be thrown over the top rope and your feet to land on the floor. Last man to survive the entire thing earns a shot at the WWF Championship or the World Title at WrestleMania, which is a pay-per-view they normally do a couple of months later. So that's the kind of setup for what the Royal Rumble is. It's one of their big ones, and it's one of the more unique ones with the Royal Rumble match. So we actually open the match with Vader versus Goldust. Now, not a lot of setup really for this particular rivalry or match. I think they may have run out of things to do with Vader or Goldust for this month, and there's not a great deal that happens in the Raws leading up to it or the television leading up to it. It feels like to me that Goldust is more aligned with Mark Mero, to be an antagonist for Sable, who is Mero's wife, and Sable's this really beautiful woman at the time who was like Mero's manager, and Mero's got a jealousy problem with her coming down and taking the spotlight, and he uses Goldust in some weird ways, like has him dress up as Sable and help him down. There's some odd angles going on at this time still, but the Vader and Goldust rivalry, there's an episode of Raw, 22nd of December. Vader attacks Goldust whilst he's dressed as Santa. So Goldust comes out and interrupts Santa, in quotation marks, who's doing a little promo in the ring and I think giving out presents and whatnot. Goldust comes out and interrupts. It starts spouting a load of bollocks. Vader, turns out, is Santa, assaults him, beats the crap out of him on that Raw. The 5th of January, the next interaction they have is when Vader runs down to the ring to save Flash Funk, after Luna had pushed him off the top rope during a match with Goldust. So Flash Funk and Goldust were fighting. Flash Funk going for his finisher. Luna pushes him off. Vader runs down and helps him because they're friends, because they're both from the Rocky Mountains or Colorado or something like that. And he comes down to save Flash Funk from a beating. I've highlighted Flash Funk in bold because I wanted to talk about Flash Funk. I'm surprised he's still there at this point, because although he's a decent worker, he's sort of like almost a cruiserweight or a light heavyweight, but a little bit bigger, but he's a bit of a high flyer. But his gimmick's just awful. Like, he comes out and he's still, I mean, this is now the Attitude Era, so everything's becoming somewhat more grounded and more towards more of a mature audience, and Flash Funk feels like a carryover from maybe even the Golden Era. I mean, it really is strange to see him still working at this point, and I don't think we'll see much more of him after this. I could be wrong. I do not remember seeing him much in 1998, so maybe he slipped down the rankings and was finally seen off. Then we've got an incident on the following Raw where Vader is hit with a coconut by Goldust because Vader's having a match with Mark Mero. Goldust interferes and hits him with a coconut. So that's the setup for this Vader v Goldust match. There may have been some more stuff before the 15th, but didn't go back to look through it. So not a great deal of setup. Vader wins after he pins Goldust. He does a Vader bomb to finish him off. And as he's setting up for that, Luna, who is Goldust's manager, I guess, or valet, jumps into the ring, onto the back of Vader. Vader still does the splash with Luna on his back, gets the 3 count. Not a great match, and for all intents and purposes, sort of kills off that rivalry because Vader goes off to do other things. Goldust continues this sort of involvement with Mark Mero and Sable and Luna. So those four are sort of, those three are basically ganging up on Sable. That's what it boils down to, a load of bullying. But that's the opening match. Not a great start. We then move into what they call the mini superstars. So these are, I believe, either small people or dwarves that are trained professional wrestlers, and they go for is it just a normal tag match or a 6-man tag match, a little 7-minute contest. I'm not really a fan of these matches. They're just sort of spot matches, like ooh-ah matches. A lot of flipping and spinning around. I mean, the minis themselves, as they're referred to, are very, very talented. But it's just a bit of an odd placement. There's never really any feud. There's no feuds or setups going into these really, and it's just a match there, just full of spots to perhaps get the crowd going. For whatever reason, they have Sunny as the guest referee, that really annoying woman who her voice is just so grating. I don't think I've heard many voices like it. It's really beginning to cut through me. I'm hoping she disappears during the latter part of 98. I can't remember what happens to her, in all honesty, but I'm looking forward to seeing the back of her. So she's a special referee, and she's pretty terrible at this. She's supposed to do a spot where she leapfrogs over one of the minis, but she doesn't jump high enough and completely botches it. But Mosiak and Max Mini and Nova go over in that match against the three others that I can't remember the names, so I've got them written here, but God knows how I'm going to try and pronounce those. So not a very good match and no setup, so not much to speak about. We've then got The Rock versus Ken Shamrock for the Intercontinental title. So this is an interesting match. We're going to go back a little bit further. So the 8th of December we're going to go back to, because Austin is still the Intercontinental Champion at this time. I think because he beat Rocky, as I said, on D-Generation X pay-per-view, which I think was the 7th. And Austin, the next night, is ordered to either to fight The Rock. Austin says to McMahon, "You don't tell me what to do, I'll do what I want." He says, "I'm going to relinquish the Intercontinental belt and go after the world title," so the WWF title. So that's the whole point of him getting rid of the IC title, is so that he can focus on going for that. So he gives the belt to The Rock. After he hands the belt to him, he turns him round, stuns him, and then nicks the belt. So that's Rocky's crowned the Intercontinental Champion, but he doesn't have the belt himself. The next week on Raw, on the 15th of the 12th, Austin throws that belt into the river, and The Rock is left fuming. I thought this would be the angle where and the catalyst for a change in the belt design, because they do change the belt designs occasionally, and I'm sure at some point we're going to get a new version of the belt. And I thought they were going to use the excuses, Austin's thrown the only version of that belt in the river, so we've got this new one, but it appears back at the Royal Rumble in the old format. So I don't know what happened there. The actual Shamrock and Rock part of things gets going on the 22nd of December, where The Rock actually challenges Shamrock at the Royal Rumble. He spouts off about how he can beat any man, UFC or otherwise, and challenges the Shamrock at the Royal Rumble. 29th of the 12th, Shamrock goes on this kind of surge of fighting the Nation members. So the first person he fights is Karma, who will become to be known as the Godfather, and then one day the Good Father later on down the line. But he beats him in under 4 minutes. The Rock then comes in the ring afterwards and volunteers Farouk. Bear in mind, Farouk meant to be the leader of the Nation. They're part of this group to fight Shamrock next week. Farouk's not happy about that. Shamrock beats Farouk the following week. So that's on the 5th of the 1st. So that's not good. That's the Nation now 2 down. 12th of the 1st, Shamrock and Mark Henry, who's kind of re-debuted shortly before this, the world's most strongest man, they go in a match against The Rock and D'Lo Brown. Shamrock sets up The Rock to go for a finisher. Henry turns on Shamrock, clotheslining him, turns heel and joins the Nation. So that's the sort of setup going into this one. Shamrock and The Rock, the Nation members, and they've got a new member in Mark Henry. The Rock actually wins the match because of a reverse decision. So he retains the title because the referee reversed his decision. Now the reason why he does that is because Shamrock hits a belly-to-belly on The Rock, scores a free count to win the IC title. As Shamrock celebrated, The Rock told the ref to check Shamrock's tights. The ref found some brass knuckles that The Rock had put there earlier on in the match. He'd hit Shamrock, knocked him out, put the brass knuckles in Shamrock's trunks, and tried to pin Shamrock there. And then Shamrock kicked out, went through that section, but tells the referee that he had some brass knuckles, and the referee reversed his decision. He pleads his innocent, Shamrock, but they say no, The Rock's going to get his belt back and he's going to win by a reverse decision. Tries to turn it over, it doesn't go anywhere, so he gives the ref a suplex. 3 refs run down and they bail out when Shamrock kind of looks in their eye. So there's some good near falls in this match though. Shamrock did a good job of doing some late kickouts when you think, oh, he's just going to get turned over. Rock was decent, like he always is. The only thing I would say is that this is a bit of a spoiler down the. It's not really a spoiler. It's an old event. It's been out over 20 years, but at WrestleMania 14 they use a very similar reverse decision in their match, and they kind of use it twice in short succession, which I don't think's the right thing to do. We then have Legion of Doom versus the New Age Outlaws for the tag team titles, and this has got a little bit of setup, I guess, for this particular one. We've got a match on the 15th of December for Raw and it's the main event. It's the Legion of Doom versus DX, which is Helmsley and Michaels. Ends in a DQ win for LOD after interference from China and New Age Outlaws hit the ring. After the match, the Outlaws and DX help then beat the absolute snot out of Animal and Hawk. Billy Gunn ends up shaving one of Hawk's head, but not his entire head. He's pretty much bald, but he has these two stripes sort of on the side of the top of his cranium, and he just shaves one of those off, and then they powerbomb Animal through the announce table. So at this point, it feels like they're setting up either one or two things: either a comeback story for LOD, who had already had a disqualification kind of loss to New Age Outlaws at a previous pay-per-view, so maybe they'll come back and win the titles, or just to give New Age Outlaws a bit more of a boost and give them a clean win over legends like the Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors, because they're getting on at this point, and it could have been an opportunity for it to be a bit of a pass the torch match. No other real build-up other than that, which is quite a long way before the match itself. The LOD kind of just go on hiatus after this absolute beatdown. A couple of interviews here and there where it's referenced, and the announcers do some spots. It's a little bit weird. But yeah, the match ends in DQ for the New Age Outlaws. So they lose but keep the title. It comes about when Road Dogg manages to handcuff Hawk to the ring post without the referee knowing. So I don't know how that slips through the net, but that happens. Okay, so that's the sort of stuff these referees can miss. The Outlaws double team on Animal, but he manages to fight both of them off and puts them both down with like a double clothesline. Animal power slams Billy Gunn, goes to cover him for the pin, but Road Dogg runs in the chair and hits him with the DQ. So they beat the snot out of Animal. Hawk finally gets so frustrated that he's able to rip apart the handcuffs and break free, cleans house, and that's the end of the match. So neither of my two faults happen. You neither get the New Age Outlaws to go over cleanly, which will promote them as a legitimate kind of tag team and kind of pass the torch, and also you don't get the LOD winning back the belts. So strange they never did either of those. But at this point, the New Age Outlaws are hitting their stride. They're entertaining. They're good quality, and they only go on to get better and better. And it's they're hitting their stride at this point and buddying up with DX, who they'll eventually become part of that faction later on down the line. So all the seeds are being planted, I guess, at this particular point. We've then got the Royal Rumble match, which usually lasts almost an hour. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through the entire match itself. It'd be ridiculous to do that. But the setup for the Rumble, though, is a little bit underwhelming. As I said, we've got Austin, who got rid of the title, relinquishes the Intercontinental title, which frees him up to focus purely on the WWF title when he mentions he's going to go into the Royal Rumble. And the setup really for the Rumble is Steve Austin roaring round nearly every episode of Raw, stunning whoever and whenever he wants to. He just turns up randomly at the end of matches, hits the Stone Cold Stunner. Whether they're heels or baby faces, it does not matter. It's indiscriminate. And this kind of makes him a marked man in the locker room. And, they're saying, well, when Austin hits the ring, everyone's going to go after him. And there is a spot where he comes in and they try and go after him, but Austin, sees most of them off. But the thought I had at the end of this was, to be honest, if you're watching this through for the first time, no one else is going to win the Royal Rumble. There's no other contenders even referenced, really. Like, the way they've set it up is that it's clear that Austin's going to win it. There's no threat to Austin losing this. I thought it was really strange. He didn't try and build one or just two other sort of chances of other people. It was just Austin was getting all this momentum going into the Rumble, and he carried it through and won the match and earns his shot at the WWF Championship. I think the final four for this one was The Rock, Farouk and Dude Love. Farouk gets rid of Dude Love. Rock eliminates Farouk, and it leaves Austin and Rocky have a good little exchange. Austin finishes him off though and gets rid of him, and it's a nice moment though, because you see The Rock and Austin, 1998, very early, and that is a sign of things to come later on down the line. They go on to be huge stars, and at the end of the match, Austin obviously is celebrating, he's won the match, and he's going to go to WrestleMania for the WWF title shot. They show Mike Tyson, who has been referenced on Raw, he's going to be part of WrestleMania. We don't know what he's going to do at this point, but he's sitting in a corporate box with Vince McMahon's son, Shane McMahon, celebrating in the luxury suite. And this is an extract from the Pro Wrestling Torch archives. Cole interviewed Tyson, who said he was thrilled for Cold Stone, who won the Royal Rumble, because nobody thought he could do it. He then predicted Michaels might beat The Undertaker because he's a young and up-and-coming tiger. At ringside, Lawler buried his head in his hands after the interview. It gives you a little bit of insight into Mike Tyson's improvisation skills when it comes to interviews and whatnot. He called Steve Austin Cold Stone. Oh dear, funny stuff. We then get to the main event. So interesting that this is the main event, because sometimes they will put the Royal Rumble match as the main event, and then there's normally a WWF Championship match. They'll put that as the co-main, or sometimes they swap it. In this case, the WWF title match between Michaels and The Undertaker, it's a casket match, and it's the main event at the Royal Rumble. This is a long feud leading up to this point. There's a lot of things that happen before this match that are relevant to what happens in the actual match itself. It features multiple storylines and multiple people, so I'm going to do my best to try and recap this for you. The genesis of this rivalry of The Undertaker and Michaels goes back to August 1997, SummerSlam. At this point, The Undertaker's still the WWF champion. He won it at WrestleMania 13 against Sid, and he's now facing Bret Hart in the main event of SummerSlam. Shawn Michaels is assigned as the guest referee. Bret and Shawn are still feuding at this time, and it boils over in the match because I think Bret might bring in a chair, and then Michaels snatches it off him before he can use it. Bret turns around and spits in Shawn Michaels' face like a good bit of gob as well. It was disgusting. Shawn Michaels retaliates, goes to hit Bret with the steel chair. Bret moves and he strikes Taker, knocks him out. Bret covers The Undertaker. Shawn Michaels, who has said he agrees to run this thing impartially, counts down The Undertaker and inadvertently costs him the championship. So he didn't do it on purpose. He was trying to hit Bret, but The Undertaker's not having that because the title's been snatched away because Shawn was careless of the chair. So they then go on and have this lacklustre match at Ground Zero, the next pay-per-view, which ends in a no contest due to interference. An odd main event and a bit of a letdown, really. But this, because of the interference from Helmsley, China, and I think Rick Rude is still knocking around in DX then, they come up with the Hell in a Cell match, which is basically a steel cage or cell that has a roof and the walls come out over the ring. So the idea of this is that no man can get in to interfere with the match. So these two are going to be locked in battle in this cell, and it's going to be at the October pay-per-view, Bad Blood, and they spell bad with 2 Ds, don't ask me why. And again, it's designed to prevent interference from influencing the match, and they're going to both be locked in there, no way in, no way out. So before we get to that match, we've just got to rewind just a little bit more and flesh out a little bit of what's been going on with The Undertaker. So we cycle back to, I think it's the end of June, maybe early July, and Paul Bearer's turned on The Undertaker. He's gone heel again. I think he may have still been heel actually, since he turned on him with Mankind in '96. But anyway, Paul Bearer reveals that The Undertaker has a younger brother called Kane, who back in the day was supposedly killed in a fire with his parents, and this fire was apparently started by The Undertaker. Turns out Kane's not actually dead. Undertaker thought he'd been dead all these years. He's scarred, he's burnt. So we've got this new personality incoming called Kane. And so this is the genesis of the Undertaker and Kane storyline. But at this point, at Bad Blood, so we go back to Bad Blood, we've only heard about Kane, we've not seen Kane. We know he exists, and we know that Paul Bearer has been kind of semi-teasing his arrival. Like there's a streak where Kane is mentioned week after week after week, and then goes missing, and then kind of cycles back in. So when it first started kicking off in the June-July Raw, I was thinking, oh wow, I forgot that Kane makes his debut at Bad Blood. I thought, oh crumbs, we're going to see Kane pretty soon. They drag it out for another 3 months. Anyway, Undertaker and Michaels go at it in the Hell in a Cell match. It's a great contest, goes back and forth. It's an absolute war. Michaels is busted open. They do actually get out of the cell because Michaels I think his back body dropped over the top rope, lands on a cameraman, like a planted cameraman, and then beats up the cameraman because he got in his way, and that leads to medical assistants needing to get into the cell, to help the cameraman. During this time, Michaels and Undertaker get out. They have a fight outside. They go on top of the cage, which is some scary stuff, and it all kind of, ends and crescendos with Michaels trying to climb down the other side of the cell, and Undertaker stamps on his feet. Stamps on his hands, knocks him off the cell. He falls about 15 feet through the announcer's table. Gets Michaels back in the ring. The end is near. He starts setting it up, and then the lights go out, and this is where Kane makes his debut. So the door's been locked again at this point. So they're back in. The referees lock the door. Kane bowls down to the ring, extra slow pace as he does. Grabs the door and rips it off its hinges, so he can get in. It's a great debut. Like, pulls it, snatches it off the hinges, and everyone's like, "Whoa, shit! How's he managed that?" Anyway, he gets in the ring, stares at the Undertaker, ends up tombstoning Undertaker. Michaels is barely able to kind of crawl over afterwards and cover, and the referee counts it down, and Michaels wins the match. Off the back of this, Kane wants to face Undertaker. He wants to fight him, but Undertaker says he will not fight his own flesh and blood, so he's refusing to do that. And then Michaels goes on, as we know, to win the WWF Championship at Survivor Series. So we land at Raw, 15th of December. Michael Cole interviews the Undertaker in the ring, and Taker mentions that he's only lost one casket match before. It took 10 men to put him in. He counts how many DX members there are and says that doesn't add up to 10, so some really good maths there from Undertaker. The lights go out. Kane and Paul Bearer come down to the ring. Bearer kind of offers, saying, "You got one last chance to fight Kane." Kane tries to, he does, he slaps Undertaker to try and yield a reaction and get him to respond. He tries to slap him again. Undertaker blocks it, and you think, oh, here we go, he's gonna fight back, but no, just stares at him, and Taker walks away. 22nd of the 12th, Kane interrupts Undertaker's match versus The Rock, ends up attacking the Undertaker, who once again refuses to fight back. Little side note on this particular event, Shawn Michaels drops the European title to Triple H in a farcical match. Sergeant Slaughter earlier in the night had ordered them to fight each other, and that the European title, which Michaels had, is on the line at the time. And Michaels basically lays down and lets him win, which is obviously farcical at that point. 29th of December, we have a little DX promo. They come out to the ring, they bring a casket out, and it's Helmsley and Chyna that come out, and Michaels pops out of the, I think actually there might have been the Druids down, but anyway, Michaels pops out of this casket. He cuts a promo on Taker. They go away, and that's the end of that. Kane, during this point, in his times where he's tried to interact with The Undertaker, and since his debut at Bad Blood, has been interrupting all sorts of matches over the past couple of months and destroying everyone in his path. So he comes in before matches, tombstone someone, then they can't carry out the match. He comes down after matches, tombstone. He's just been destroying people. So Chains, who's part of DOA, bands together with 6 other wrestlers to kind of challenge and confront Kane in the ring. So Kane comes down to answer this challenge. He's in the ring with 7 other guys that are looking to beat the shit out of him. Then Undertaker comes down, and instead of Kane attacking the Undertaker or the Undertaker attacking Kane to help these other wrestlers, Undertaker helps Kane to clear the ring. 7 others are dealt with. They have a little stare down. Undertaker walks away, says to the camera, or says on his way back, "I'll burn in hell before I fight you." And at this point you think, that's a bit of an interesting turn, because he doesn't want to fight his brother, but he's quite happy to help him. On this same night, 29th of the 12th, Shawn Michaels has a match against Owen Hart for the WWF title. He retains it. He loses via DQ but retains the title because Triple H interferes. So you can tell at this point Undertaker and Michaels aren't really directly feuding too much. It's a little bit of an odd one. There's 2 storylines kind of going on where Michaels is feuding with Owen Hart also, so it's a little bit of cross wires and bits, but it kind of works and works out in its favour, I think. 5th of January, Paul Bearer comes down to the ring looking like shit, saying he's lost Kane because the Undertaker's poisoned his mind, referring to the previous week where they seemingly teamed up. So it looks like Kane is going to abandon Paul Bearer and go over to the Undertaker's side. Michaels comes into the ring later on in the night, starts cutting a promo, but is interrupted by the Undertaker, or the Undertaker's music I should say. 4 druids bring down the DX spray painted casket. Michaels assumes it's Triple H or Chyna in there, so he goes over to open it. As he does that, Triple H and Chyna appear at the top of the stage. Michaels looks up and finally realises that someone else must be in there. Taker pops out, drags Michaels into the casket, the lid closes, and Raw ends. And we never find out what happened. I'm assuming the Undertaker beat the shit out of him, or maybe Helmsley and Chyna came down and pulled him out, but we never find out. That it goes off air as the lid closes, so I'm not sure what they were kind of playing at there. 12th of January, we've got Raw. Cole interviews DX in the ring. During the night, Michaels has made reference that he's got information regarding Kane. Michaels says that DX would be glad to have Kane as a family member because he never had one to accept him when he was younger, and he introduces Kane as the newest member of D-Generation X. The lights go out, but instead of Kane's music, it's Undertaker's music. Taker begins to play a video on the Titantron, so we know it's him. Undertaker starts walking down the ring, and Undertaker says that Michael should be focused on his title defence at the Rumble, and vows to put a 6-inch hole into his forehead. Chyna then sort of gets involved and starts mouthing off to Undertaker. She gets lifted up for a choke slam. Helmsley, who has at some point damaged his knee before all this, hits Taker with the crutch, saving Chyna. So they start beating down the Undertaker, and then Kane's music plays. He comes out. The announcers wonder what's going to go on. We're all wondering. Kane grabs Michaels from behind. Hunter nails Kane with a crutch, and then they bail out the ring. Kane is left in the ring on himself. He saved his brother from a beatdown. Undertaker's walking off up the ramp. Kane then sort of kneels down to one knee, extends his arm to the Undertaker. The Undertaker signals it back, and it's this great moment, this communication between the 2 brothers. They're on the same page, the Brothers of Destruction, and it sets up a interesting casket match at the Royal Rumble, because and this is kind of where wrestling is at its best. And I'm not saying these storylines are necessarily the best, but when they have this many layers going into it, you've got long-running feuds that are kind of overlapping, and storylines that are overlapping with one another. This one, kind of, you can pull parts and segments of the match and factors that are going to play into the match back to June or July 1997 for the whole Kane thing, and we're here in January 1998 getting some payoffs for those. So we've got Michaels versus Taker. We've got Michaels, who has DX to come out and help him. We know Kane is on Undertaker's side, but he doesn't actually come out to the ring with him. So it's Triple H and Chyna who are there. It's a back and forth match. Michaels takes this really nasty bump where he's kind of back body dropped over the top rope. I think he's trying to go over the casket as well, but he clips his back on the way through, and I think that is what done his back in, at least initially. I know he had some issues before that, but I think that may have herniated a disc or two and done some damage in the short term. So that may be one of the catalysts for Michaels taking a hiatus later on. Helmsley and Chyna are constantly interfering during the match. JR keeps making references saying this wouldn't be happening if Kane's down here. Why is Kane not down here? Undertaker eventually gets the upper hand, chokeslams Michaels, tombstones him into the casket. So imagine this: he's got him in the tombstone position. He's got Michaels in the tombstone position. He gets out onto the apron. The casket's laying there, and he literally jumps off the apron and tombstones into the casket, which is complete insanity. And I've not seen anything like it before, and I do wonder. Well, obviously Michaels was okay, but dangerous move to do. For some reason, Chyna runs the referee into the stairs, like knocks him out, makes the ref take a bump. I don't know why, because there's no disqualifications in this match, and maybe she was scared that Undertaker was going to close the lid there and then and win the match, but that doesn't happen. Los Barricas come down to the ring alongside New Age Outlaws, and they all attack the Undertaker, prevent him from closing the lid. So again, I don't know why Chyna's done this, because whatever's happening with the New Age Outlaws and Los Barricas, there's no DQs, so it really doesn't matter if he saw this happen or didn't. I don't understand it really. And so anyway, they stop him from closing the lid. They start to attack the Undertaker. Lights go out. Kane's music hits. He comes down. He clears the ring of both of those factions. Chyna and Helmsley have sort of dragged Michaels out of the casket. Kane then, pauses in front of his brother, and then he attacks him. So we had these 2 weeks of hope where we think the brothers are going to unite, and Kane, it was all a ruse. He played babyface for a couple of weeks, and beats the shit out of the Undertaker. Choke slams him into the casket. Michaels closes the lid. The ref is still down at this point. I don't know if he actually sees the lid being closed. I'm pretty sure he doesn't see the Undertaker inside the casket, like being slammed into it and the lid being closed. So at some point when he calls the matches, he's taking it on someone's word because he's not seen it with his own two eyes. Beside the point, the lid's closed. Kane and Paul Bearer lock the lid. They roll it towards the entrance right at the top of the stage. Kane, for some odd reason, takes an axe to the lid of the casket, beats the snot out of it, cuts holes in it, then pours gas or petrol onto the casket, and they set it on fire. And that's how the pay-per-view ends. It ends with the casket ablaze, Undertaker's inside, Kane and Paul Bearer cackling, and Kane's not laughing, but Paul Bearer certainly is pleased with himself. And pay-per-view ends with Undertaker seemingly burnt to death. Not the greatest match, but decent. And I guess the main thing is it progresses and sets up and simplifies some major storylines. It essentially ends the feud between the Undertaker and Michaels, which frees up Taker to go and focus on Kane, so we can finally hopefully get to a conclusion on that match. And then Michaels, who now has Steve Austin breathing down his neck. He's the number one contender after winning the Rumble, and they're most likely going to meet at WrestleMania 14, so he can now switch his focus to Austin and start building that match up. And that's that. That's how the first WWF Attitude Era recap has been done. Interesting format. I can't think of another way to do it sensibly, because you can't go for every Raw, episode by episode. I think it's better to focus on the matches and then recall why the matches are happening. And if they're happening for literally no reason, then call that out as well, which we had a couple of examples in this pay-per-view. But next up will be No Way Out. Now, No Way Out is interesting because it's sandwiched between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. So what I find hard to deal with, or hard to, I guess it must be difficult to book as well, is that you've got the winner of the Royal Rumble, and then whoever the champion normally is at the end of the Royal Rumble is who's going to be the WrestleMania champion. So you almost have 2 months to build that, but you've got this pay-per-view, which at this point is No Way Out, in between that. So if you put the belt on the line, you run the risk of it being a bit obvious that the champion's going to retain it. Or if you do switch the belts, then you've only got 4 weeks to build up the Royal Rumble winner. So how will they handle this in 1998? Will it be a bit of a stopgap? I don't know. I do know because I've seen it, but you guys will find out next time when I return for some Attitude Era recaps, and it'll be focused on No Way Out and the storylines leading into that particular event. So what star rating am I going to give the Royal Rumble 1998? First one it's being starred, so this, take this with a bit of a pinch of salt because I don't really have a baseline yet. But what do we have? We had Vader v Goldust with very little setup and not the best of matches. Had the Super Minis, again no setup, just a as far as I was concerned, a spot fest, and Sonny, awful refereeing. Rock v Shamrock was decent, that was okay. Legion of Doom versus New Age Outlaws was okay, but the DQ ending once again. Some good heat coming into it, but didn't deliver on either of the storylines I thought they could have done at this stage, and maybe that will come to fruition later on, although based on what I've seen so far it doesn't appear as though that's going to happen. Royal Rumble match was okay. I mean, they're difficult to execute. Austin wins it, and I think they had a good story going into it, but it was a little bit obvious that he was going to win. And then the Michaels versus Taker casket match, good, and the match was decent enough. And I think the outcomes for the stories going forward is excellent. So that's definitely the highlight of the evening. I'll put that as the match of the night, which is Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker in the casket match. Overall rating, though, for the Royal Rumble 1998, I'm going to give it 2 stars. I was going to give it 1.5, but I just think Taker and Michaels kind of saved it at the end, and they clearly start to move tracks around and focus on the stuff that's been bubbling under the surface for a little while. So 2 stars for Royal Rumble 1998. 2 out of 5 is not bad. They can't complain with that, can they? But that's it. That's the first in-depth recap of the Attitude Era. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing the research, watching it all, taking notes, and constructing this. So I'm looking forward to doing it. It's time consuming, but it's good fun to sit here and talk about wrestling again, and especially the wrestling. It's getting to the stage, as I mentioned, WrestleMania 14's when it all kicks off properly for me, and we're getting to that stage again, we're close, which is good. Please like and subscribe this if you're listening on or watching on YouTube, and if you're on a podcast app or you found us, subscribe to our feed. You'll get all sorts of different content. You'll have wrestling, films, television. Gaming is the majority of it, but we try and branch out when we can and when we've got interesting things to do. You can find us on all good podcast outlets. We prefer Player FM though, because those guys have looked after us in the past. So if you're looking for a new podcast app, give those guys a try. That's it though. Nothing else for me to say apart from thanks for your time and ta-da.